right, again, good morning, everyone. It is Tuesday, August 10th, and we will call this meeting to order. We would ask that folks please rise if they are willing and able for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. The invocation today will be given by Reverend Paul Jackson of the University Congregational Church. Reverend Jackson, good to have you.
3 mayors now have said Congregational Church. It's a congregational church.
That's a Freudian slip. Maybe you should
That's all right. All right. Mayor Whipple, members of council, Wichita City staff, citizens, and guests, please hear these words of invocation for today's work, and please join me in a spirit of contemplation. Holy One, we come before you today ready to do the work of our community, prepared to help our neighbors, ready to lead our city. We ask that you grant us the wisdom of the indigenous peoples on whose land we stand this morning. As the south wind blows through our spirits, may it refresh us and renew us to the work of our community. Grant us the space we need to understand where our differences lie and help us to learn that there is more that unites us than divides us. Grant us the love, the tolerance, and the patience to open our hearts to everyone who calls Wichita their home. Help us to better love our neighbors, even those neighbors with whom we disagree. We aren't commanded only to love the neighbor who looks like us, who acts like us, who lives like us. We are commanded to love God and to love our neighbors, regardless. All means all. And we love all with the same love with which you love us. Finally, Holy God, we ask that you remove the hate from our hearts, the hatred that keeps the scales on our eyes and denies us the ability to see you within every human we encounter, even those humans we may not like. You abide within. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Deepest apologies for the mispronunciation of the word congressional, Pastor. Madam Clerk.
Approval of the minutes of the regular meeting August 3rd and special meeting August 5th, 2021.
Has every member had a chance to review the minutes? And if so, is there any discussion on the minutes? If there is no discussion on the minutes, then I will make a motion to pass the minutes as they are presented.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Clerk will open the roll. The result of 7 yeas, that motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
One publication, 811 day.
If there is a members of the audience who is here to accept the proclamation for 811, please make your way to the front. Proclamation of the City of Wichita, Kansas, founded in 1870. Whereas thousands of times a year, the underground infrastructure in Kansas is damaged by those who fail to contact 811 to have underground lines located prior to digging, resulting in service interruption, environmental damage, and threats to public safety. And whereas in 2005, the Federal Communications Commission designated 811 to provide contractors and homeowners with a simple number to contact utility operators to request the location of underground lines as the intended dig site. And whereas Black Hills Energy maintains its commitment to educate the public about safe digging practices and encourage compliance with local and state safe digging rules and regulations. And whereas damage prevention is a shared responsibility. By using safe digging practices, Wichita contractors and homeowners can save time, money, and help keep Kansas infrastructure safe and connected. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Brandon Whipple, Mayor of the City of Wichita, Kansas, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim August 11th, 2021 as 811 Day, in the city of Wichita, Kansas, to encourage everyone to call 811 before they dig. It's safe, it's free, and it's the law.
Good morning, everybody. My name is James Williams. I'm the Community Affairs Manager for Black Hills Energy. Along with me are some really great people from Black Hills who do incredible work in our community. Black Hills Energy is a utility that serves central and west Wichita with safe and reliable natural gas. We serve a total of 117,000 customers in Kansas. On behalf of all of them, we sincerely appreciate and thank you for highlighting the critical importance of safe digging. 811 Day is an observation that we take very seriously. We have a culture as Kansans that we roll up our sleeves and we get it done, but sometimes that pioneer spirit makes us forget an important step. Anytime a shovel goes in the ground, a fence post is installed, a sprinkler system is repaired, or a construction project occurs, 811 needs to be called at least 2 business days before. Otherwise, there's a real risk you could face fines, damage infrastructure, or even worse. Our people live and work and are engaged in our community. We're neighbors, we're volunteers. We volunteer for West Precinct, Wichita West Police Precinct. We support Big Brothers Big Sisters in Wichita and many other organizations. I can tell you that we want nothing more than the well-being of the town we call home. So in conclusion, Mayor, we sincerely thank you for highlighting this important service in our community. All right. Appreciate it. All right.
Madam Clerk.
Public agenda, Celeste Reset, Century 2 Performing Arts Center.
Right. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Celeste Reset, Wichita native, founder of Say Century 2, a nonpartisan grassroots organization. I'm speaking to you this morning as your boss. The 2020 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, the CAFR, contains an organizational chart for the city of Wichita. At the very top of this structure is the citizens of Wichita. Each one of you, the mayor and the city council members, report to the citizens of Wichita. I am a citizen of Wichita, and I am speaking to you today as your boss. I am not pleased with the proposed budget and how you plan to cut funding for Century 2. Citizens of Wichita, your boss voted to construct the building. Citizens of Wichita, your boss came up with the name Century 2. Citizens of Wichita, your boss provide for annual support of Century 2 through the transient guest tax. Charter Ordinance number 221 specifies the first priority of these funds is to take care of and maintain Century 2. You are letting us down. Funds from this tax have been diverted. The Tourism and Convention Fund paid for an expensive and mysterious capital project. Bond debt was incurred to pay for this project, but neither the budget nor the CAFR tell the citizens of Wichita what the project was for. A citizen reading the budget would assume the city spent millions to upgrade Century 2, but this is not true. All the money was given away to a wealthy developer, Jim Corrick. Label this debt for what it is, Jim Corrick's Fairfield Inn. City Finance Department calls this request superfluous. This request is actually perfectly reasonable. I am asking for one sentence somewhere in the CAFR or the budget that explains this debt has nothing to do with Century 2. It was used for a private hotel in Waterwalk. Transient guest taxes are also being drained to give millions to Visit Wichita, a company that is supposed to promote tourism in Wichita. And yet, year after year, their ads are mediocre and uninspiring. Or as one city council member said, every visitor's campaign. I'm asking you to create a request for proposal for tourism promotion and send it out for bidding. I know several of you know this is something you should do. Please do it. Give another company the contract for promoting Wichita. If Visit Wichita continues to get the tourism contract because Jim Corrick sits on the board of directors, then remove him And those of you who accepted campaign contributions from Jim Corrick should abstain from voting on Visit Wichita's contract because that is a conflict of interest. The 2022 budget states there are deferred capital needs for Century 2, the roof, HVAC, lift stations, elevators, and plumbing. The roof was rated as poor 12 years ago in the 2009 Facility Assessment Report, and yet these problems have not been fixed. Direct City Manager Layton to fix the building and make these much-needed repairs. He works for you. Use historic tax credits to reduce the cost, just like Spaghetti Works and other smart businessmen have done in Old Town. We do not need another rundown public building managed privately. The Wichita Ice Rink was enough. I asked what best practices were expected with private management of Century 2 and was told ticketing, staffing, and preventative maintenance activities. Preventative maintenance does not take care of problems caused by deferred maintenance. Again, fix maintenance problems before passing the building on to a private company. I was told that private management success will be measured by collaboration with Visit Wichita. Really? Are you kidding? The same group that siphons millions from the tourism fund for themselves and their chairman of the board, what motivation do they have to care about Century 2? You actually reward them for running the building down. The less spent on Century 2, the more money they can take from the tourism fund. And if private management of our facilities continues, then why are you not cutting City Manager Layton's salary? If he has less people to supervise and fewer facilities to manage, that should be reflected in a reduced salary. Cut the assistant manager's salaries too. The citizens of Wichita, your boss, have asked for transparency and accountability. We voted former Mayor Longwell out of office 2 years ago. We are ready for change, and that may mean new faces on City Council. We are your boss, and we do not approve of hiding transactions in the budget and CAFR. Quit hiding debt paid for by taxpayers for wealthy developers, put an RFP out there for Wichita tourism, and cut City Manager Layton's salary. The citizen of Wichita are your boss, and we are voting in the November election. The election results will be your performance review, and it may be your last. Thank you. Any questions?
I guess I have a question.
Sure.
Has your political organization conducted any polling?
Say that again, sorry.
The political organization the nonpartisan political organization that you said you're here for, have you guys conducted any polling when it comes to your I guess your talking points today?
Sure. 17,264 citizens agree with what I'm saying today.
No,
and we are
wait. So my understanding,
actually upset that deferred maintenance, I'm answering your question.
Right,
We're actually upset that deferred maintenance has been allowed to continue with Century 2 for the past 12 years.
let me clarify my question.
Sure. That might be helpful.
No, it wasn't. And it's my fault. Let me clarify this. If you're here and you're saying, I represent all the voices of the citizens, I'm just interested, have you done a poll?
I didn't say I represent all the citizens of Wichita.
Okay.
You need to be corrected on that comment.
Okay, good. I just want to show you said it quite a few times that you're the boss because you are here on behalf of all the citizens.
I'm referencing the citizens of Wichita when I speak and say that we are the boss of you, the mayor, and city council. And it's
we agree on
reflected
that.
in the CAFR right here in the organizational chart.
Okay, no, we agree on that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
All right, thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Carl Peter John, Century 2 Performing Arts Center.
The Honorable, welcome.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. For the record, Carl Peter John. I would describe myself as a leader. I was part of the petition drive, part of the 17,000 that did that. But I come to you today to praise the council's policy, number 38. And I want to bring it up because this was adopted August 13th last year, which I know you've got at least one member who wasn't here at that time on the council, and this is the advisory election for Century 2 in the library that the council adopted. I believe it was unanimously. Now, if I'm wrong on that, council members, please correct me if it was not unanimously, because this is an excellent policy, and it creates an incredible opportunity for you as community leaders to bring Wichita together. And I want to read from it briefly because it acknowledges that we had over 17,000 individuals sign the petition to save Century 2, but what it didn't mention was we did this in the middle of a viral pandemic. We lost about 50 days, about a third of the time, to collect the signatures. Mayor, you asked about polling. Actually, going door to door or having people come in, bringing in petitions, and you'd see a car out in the parking lot and would have a Bernie Bro bumper sticker on it. It's parked next to a car that says Alex Jones rocks. And one's taking out yard signs saying Save Century 2, and the other one's bringing in petitions for Celeste or myself or some of the other notaries to notarize for the petition drive. And this policy that you all adopted says in part, on July 13th, 2020, the Wichita Historical Preservation Board accepted a nomination to place Century 2 and the Wichita Public Central Library building on the Register of Historic Places and the National Registry of Historic Places. And in part because of that, and it goes on to say, quote, "It is the council's intent to enact a policy consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance requested by the Save Century 2 petitioners while remaining in compliance with provisions and dictates of state law." And goes on to say, "The City Council, pursuant to its home rule authority to request of the Sedgwick County election officer an advisory election before any demolition of Century 2 Performing Arts Center or the Wichita Public Central Library occurs." I agree with that. I'm glad you agreed with it and put that policy in place. Now, here's the opportunity. We've got an election coming up. It would only take 4 of you, one to make a motion, another second, 2 more to agree. Let's put it on the ballot. And I'm going to give you another reason why. I was with an organization, we were involved with a city issue back in 1993, which was a year in which we only had city council races. There was no mayor's race, just like this year. And the turnout in that election was so much higher than 2 years earlier when we had a mayor up and 2 years later, because the public was able to participate and have a say. And your policy, this will be no cost to the city. We will implement this policy. We'll put this on the ballot. All it's going to take is 4 of you. I urge you to implement policy number 38. Now July 15th, I was at a public meeting and council members Tuttle, Fry, and Sorello were there. And Century 2, I raised the question about bringing it up, and Councilman Fry raised the question, well, what would the language be that you'd put on the ballot? Here's my proposed language. And I've got 9 copies. I'll give 1 for each of you and 1 for the clerk and 1 for the manager. Quote, "Municipally owned buildings that are on the National Register of Historic Places shall not be demolished or otherwise adversely affected without voter approval in Wichita. This advisory voter referendum proposal includes Century 2 and the Main Street Library buildings." Unquote. Now, I've done my best, Councilman Fry, to meet your challenge. I've got the language here. I'll pass it on. And Mr. Mayor, I'm finished, and I'd be willing to stand for any questions. I'd love to hear you guys say, let's go for it. Let's get 38 done and do it today.
So I do have a follow-up question, and as a former elected official, I think you bring a certain level of experience as these matters, so it's an honest question. Century 2 at this moment, there is no plans to demolish, destroy, or replace Century 2. If we were to put this on the ballot, would we be misleading people to believe that Century 2 is in a immediate danger of being demolished or replaced? Or should we wait until, if there is a plan moving forward that citizens should weigh on, shouldn't we wait until that's actually, might actually happen?
Well,
what would be, if we did just a dependatory election right now, what would, if it passed, now are we obligated to replace Century 2 even though we have no intention of that in our budgets?
Well, Mr. Mayor, basically, we've got a situation where you've got a policy in place I'm suggesting that you just implement your policy. It's just timely. And there's been proposals, whether we're talking about the Riverfront Legacy Master Plan, or there was a more recent proposal that would significantly transform the building. But I think from your question about polling, having talked with citizens across the political spectrum in our community, if you gentlemen and ladies want to bring our community together, I think the opportunity for the public to speak out on Century 2 at the November election this year, this is just a golden opportunity, and I think it would be a huge mistake not to take advantage of it. And I think it would provide clarity for you all as decision makers what the citizens of this community support and would like to see occur.
So would a vote this November be valid in 5 years, in your opinion?
Well, I think
Or we have to do a revote
you
at
could,
that point?
I think a vote would be better. I'm not going to worry about a hypothetical about future votes when we haven't had the first vote. That seems a little putting the cart in front of the horse, Mr. Mayor, but I'm just of the view that I'd love to see, I wanted to vote last week, and I couldn't. There was no issue for me to vote on in my part of town. If you were in Council Member Tuttle, Council Member Fry, or Council Member Pooblaw's district, there was no city race and there was no school board primary. So there was literally, they say, well, we had low voter turnout. Well, if you can't vote, that's going to diminish the turnout. And so I'm giving you some ideas. You want to increase public participation in the November election. Let's implement your city council policy number 38. Now, if you guys want to change the policy, obviously 4 of you, I know the magic number across the street when I was a commissioner. This was our magic number, 3. You all, it's 4. Charter ordinance, okay, 5. But for this important issue for the community, and I think we could have gotten 25,000 signatures if we'd had all 180 days to do it and we continued petitioning. And think about how many votes were cast in the last city council race in 2019. It would have been roughly half participation, Mr. Mayor. And so I'd like to get a vote. We can worry about things beyond that at that point. I sure appreciate your attention and time and look forward to seeing what you all might want to do with implementing your policy. If there are no other questions, I'll go back and...
We got a council member on the board, but I do appreciate your clarification of my question. Councilmember Cirillo.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate all of the work that your folks have done for Century 2. I have expressed support for Century 2 in the public library and in my past comments and remain supportive. My question has to do with whether you would be supportive of a more descriptive question on the ballot if and when there were a citywide election. Would you be supportive of asking voters directly, yes or no, whether they support demolishing Century 2 or not?
Well, I think the draft language I've prepared implicitly covers that point, Councilman. My effort in this was to try and come up with something concise and straightforward without getting too deeply into the more difficult language. I know I've been criticized. In fact, there were some minutes last year that said, and actually I was working the election in August of 2020 when you all had a meeting, and this issue came up that I allegedly had been misstated. It was misstated that I had criticized the language in our petition. I have not then, did not during any time subsequently. But what I've tried to come up with today, Councilman, was a straightforward piece of language that accurately describes what we're trying to achieve in terms of getting the public to participate and implement your policy number 38. And I wanted to make sure, Councilman, that you were aware of it because obviously you're new and this is something that was done before you arrived.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate not only your time and work on this issue, but also your allowing us to ask questions.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Janine Shantz, non-discrimination ordinance.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. The preamble to the Constitution, the Kansas Constitution. We, the people of Kansas, grateful to Almighty God for our civil and religious privileges in order to ensure the full enjoyment of our rights as American citizens, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the state of Kansas. From the Kansas Bill of Rights, Section number 7. The right to worship God according to the dictates of conscience shall never be infringed, nor shall any person be compelled to attend or support any form of worship, nor shall any control of or interference with the rights of conscience be permitted. My name is Janine Shantz, and although I live in Rose Hill, I work and do business in Wichita, as does most of my family. Thank you, Mayor, for inviting feedback regarding the non-discriminatory ordinance the council is now considering. I think it is fortuitous that the vote on the NDO was postponed 90 days. As Mayor Whipple's email response to me states that he wishes religious leaders, quote, would have given me a chance to point out the language in the ordinance that proves their fears are unfounded, unquote. Perhaps the mayor will take this opportunity to meet with religious leaders for a fuller discussion beyond this time here. I have emailed my concerns with the NDO several times, and since I have not received answers to my questions, I bring some of them here today. How will religious rights be protected by this ordinance? How does this ordinance not conflict with our Kansas Bill of Rights? Dictates of conscience shall never be infringed. How will the consciences of cake bakers, photographers, wedding planners, etc. be protected? Where in this ordinance does the council affirm the rights of citizens to decline to engage in LGBT affirming messages and activities? Mayor Whipple stated in his email response that the proposed ordinance covers only housing, employment, and public accommodations. So how are the rights of conscience protected in the staffing of churches, private schools, wedding services, child care services, shelters, and other faith-based organizations? How can the religious beliefs in traditional marriage of one man and one woman and two biological genders successfully coexist with this ordinance? How are you protecting the rights of conscience for all your constituents? Regarding enforcement, Section J, the hearing officer is further authorized in his or her discretion and in lieu of a civil penalty to require reasonable educational requirements. What exactly are reasonable educational requirements? Where can the public view these materials? Exactly what is meant by educational? Is this assigned reading? Are these videos? Are they classes? Is it counseling? Who will be deciding what is reasonable? And what materials will be used? I think this piece needs to be clearly outlined and available for review by the public before the NDO goes for a final council vote. But the public should have a clear and precise knowledge of what is intended and what the educational requirements will be. According to the Kansas Bill of Rights, the educational requirements cannot interfere with rights of conscience. I look forward to receiving answers to the questions I came with today. Thank you.
And thank you. I guess the simplest answer at this point, and I would love to meet with you after, is that our ordinance would only enforce current law at a local level, which means if any religious institution, who I believe are excluded from this, is currently lawful, then they should have nothing to worry about if we enforce that law at the local level so that it is more accessible to minorities, people of color, those who this seek to protect.
I hear you say those things. I believe our rights are still vulnerable.
Councilmember Cirillo.
Thank you, Mayor. And I would encourage you to, just to make sure you know that this council, facilitated by myself, Councilmember Tuttle, and Councilmember Claycomb, are helping to facilitate a meeting with the Kansas Leadership Council, Kansas Leadership Center, I apologize. A date has not been set for that meeting yet, but I would highly encourage you to stay in touch with us and participate in that meeting once it becomes available.
I would look forward to that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Council, consent agenda items 1 through 19.
Has every member had a chance to review the consent agenda? And if so, is there any discussion? There's no discussion on any of the items 1 through 19 on the consent agenda or any reason to pull any of those items. If there is none, then I will make a motion to accept the consent agenda as it is presented.
Second.
Motion has been seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open the roll. Having received 7 yea votes, that motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Report of Board of Bids and Contracts dated August 9th, 2021.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Hannah Lang, Department of Finance, here for the August 9th Board of Bids recommendations. First engineering bid we have is PAV Entrance and PAV Phase 1A to serve Schulte Johnson 2nd Edition. Recommendation is Kansas Paving for Groups 1 and 2 for a total of $404,404.40. First purchasing bid we have is Uniform Rental Cintas Corporation for $75,000. Housing Department Workstations, John A. Marshall Company for $79,639.04. Water Screens at Cheney Pump Station, Haynes Equipment Company for $68,463.88. This is our purchasing procurement website, as well as our current open request for proposals. That is the Board of Bid recommendations. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions of staff? No questions of staff. Is there any input from the public? Input from the public? Any discussion? No discussion, then I'll make the motion to accept staff's recommended action.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Clerk, open a roll. After receiving 7 yeas, that motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Petitions for public improvements.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. There's one development for your consideration today for revised petitions. The signatures on all petitions represent 100% of the improvement district and are valid per Kansas statute. Northgate 5th Edition, which is north of 53rd Street North and west of Meridian. In April of this year, the City Council approved petitions for water, sewer, and drainage improvements to serve this development. Developer has submitted revised petitions with new budgets to cover the cost of a private bid. And again, this is still for the same water, stormwater drain, and sanitary sewer improvements, and the increases are shown here. Staff recommends City Council approve the revised petitions and budgets, adopt the amending resolutions, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Is there questions of staff? So confident he just walks off knowing that there's no questions. Any input from the public? No input. Any discussion from the bench? No discussion. With that, I will make the motion to take staff's recommended action to approve the revised petition and budget, adopt the amending resolution, authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second? Motion has been seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open a roll. Result is 7 yeas. That motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Public hearing and resolution of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds, Citation Holdings LLC, Breck Manufacturing.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Tim Goodpasture with the City's Office of Economic Development. For the record, the item before you today is a request for a letter of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds for Citation Holdings LLC for the benefit of Breck Manufacturing. Breck Manufacturing is located in Gardena, California, which is in the Los Angeles area. It was founded in 1968 as a machine shop and today manufactures complex structural parts for commercial and military aircraft, including the C-17 Globemaster, the Airbus A380, the 737, 777, and 787 Boeing platforms, as well as the F-15 Eagle, F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, and the FA-18 Hornet. Citation Holdings LLC is a recently formed limited liability corporation that was formed for the acquisition of 2 buildings in Wichita. The buildings are located at 2601 and 2621 South Sheridan. Citation Holdings is owned by Marwan Hamouri, who is the president and CEO of Breck Manufacturing. Citation plans to lease the buildings to Breck Manufacturing. The current economic development guidelines recommend that for existing buildings that they be vacant for at least 2 years before being considered for a property tax abatement. Brittain Machine, which was the last company to operate out of these buildings, has provided us with a letter that states that they concluded their operations in this building in June of 2019, thereby satisfying the 2-year requirement. You can see in this aerial Pawnee Street running across the top of the aerial from left to right. On the left side of the aerial, you can see West Street running from top to bottom. And on the right-hand side, you can see Meridian Street. The area outlined in red is the location of 2601 and 2621 South Sheridan. These are some images of the exterior of the buildings. Citation Holdings is requesting a letter of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $3 million. This would cover approximately $2.5 million in acquisition costs, as well as $400,000 in renovation costs. The company qualifies for a 100% property tax abatement based on job creation, capital investment, being in a regional growth plan sector, and the utilization of state incentives, but to achieve a ratio of benefits to costs of at least 1-to-1, we will reduce the percentage abatement to 85%. Currently, Breck does not have a presence in Wichita. It projects that it will create at least 75 net new jobs over the next 5 years, with annual wages in excess of $50,000 a year. The value of 1 year of an 85% property tax abatement is approximately $70,000 to all taxing jurisdictions, with the city's share being approximately $20,000 a year. The value of the sales tax exemption is approximately $13,000 for all taxing jurisdictions and approximately $1,000 for the city. A cost-benefit analysis was conducted by the Center for Economic Development and Business Research at Wichita State University, which showed an overall ratio of benefits to costs of 1.31-to-1 for the city, 1.01-to-1 for the city's general fund, and 2-to-1 for the city's debt service fund. Therefore, it is staff's recommendation that the City Council close the public hearing, adopt the resolution of intent, and authorize the necessary signatures. Ed Dunn, who is with Koch Sidoff Hand & Dunn accounting firm, which represents Citation Holdings and Breck Manufacturing, is here and can answer questions regarding the company, and I would be happy to stand for any questions as well.
Are there any questions of staff? Councilmember Bubach. Is your thing on?
Thank you very much. Tim, the only question I had is, this was on our agenda Thursday night, learned about it Friday. Was this something, I see the governor's office announced this, is this something that the governor helped to bring them to Kansas, or just to figure out the situation?
Great question. The first introduction that we had to Marwan Hamouri was several months ago, and it included the state, it included Evergy, and it included the city. And Marwan Hamouri was looking at a variety of locations. He was familiar with Wichita because he had previously been a general manager at Triumph here in town. And so this was one of the communities he was looking at. And the package that came together from the state, from Evergy, and from the city was part of what persuaded Marwan Hamouri to pursue these buildings and pursue Wichita as the location for this expansion for Breck.
Okay. Well, what kind of state incentives are coming as well?
There's a variety of state incentives. They're still finalizing some of them based on what they're projecting in terms of the jobs and in terms of the wages. So they don't have a final package as yet, but they are looking at PEAK. They're looking at the High Performance Incentive Program. They're looking at Kansas Industrial Training. So there are a number of programs that the state has offered as part of a package to incentivize them to locate here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Further questions of staff? See none. With that, is there any public input?
I'll ask this again, I've asked it before, but one thing I learned from having worked 25 years in private industry is when you have projects that show you a cost-benefit analysis, it makes sense, financial sense, and business know-how if you do a follow-up to that project and do a 5 or 3 year follow-up cost-benefit analysis. And I don't understand why the Office of Economic Development isn't required to do that.
I'd be happy to answer that question. It's a great question, and actually, we are required to do a follow-up. In the state of Kansas, property tax abatements can be extended for a period of 10 years in total. Our local policy, which has predated my 10 years with the city, is that we do those property tax abatements on what we call a 5+5 year basis. So the company is projecting what jobs and wages they will have over the next 5 years. At the 5-year mark, we do go back to the company and we do require them to provide us with a statement about how many jobs they have provided, net new jobs, and what those wages are compared to what was projected at the initial date, like a date today. And then we come back to the city council and do in fact have you recommend a second 5-year abatement or not recommend a second 5-year abatement if the company has not achieved the projected job and wage goals that they had at the outset of the approval of the property tax abatement.
Thank you. Further public input? Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Tammy Paraska, 501 East Douglas. On behalf of the Greater Wichita Partnership, we really want to encourage you to accept this resolution. This was an exciting project that we worked on with Scott and with Tim, and it wasn't an easy project. Scott makes him sound so easy, but he has really worked really hard to help us win this over California. Luckily, Marwan had worked here, I'm trying to think how many years, 4 to 6 years, so he was familiar with our ecosystem and our trained workforce and our training pipeline. So he got it, but his board did not get it. It really took this package from all the partners to really win this deal. So anyway, on behalf of the partnership, we really do encourage you to help us add these 75 jobs to the community, and we appreciate all your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Further input? See none. Is there discussion from the bench? If there's no further discussion, then I will make the motion to accept staff's recommended action to approve the revised petition and budget and adopt the amending resolution and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Councilmember Blubach. With that, clerk open roll. Members cast the vote. The result of 7 yeas, that motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Northwest Wichita Water Facility Power Supply.
Good morning. Bill Perkins with Public Works and Utilities. This item is an agreement and transfer of property to Evergy to provide power for the Northwest Water Treatment Plant project. Initial conversations with Evergy, we were identifying what assets they had available to provide the power needs for the plant. They only had one asset within the area, 138 kV transmission line that I'll show you.
I apologize, sir. Just need to rise to a point of parliamentary procedure. I motioned for the wrong recommendation, although they are very similar. So I just wanted to ensure with legal that we don't have to go back and re-vote on that. And it's embarrassing to admit that, but I want to make sure that we have our house in order, and I apologize to you, sir.
May I ask the clerk read what was read?
I'm sorry, I did not hear.
I
what you
believe
said.
I read, my motion was the recommended action of the previous item instead of for the item that we just voted on.
Okay. So do we need to do another vote?
I just wanted to ensure that we're okay with either the standard vote because those motions are very similar, or if we have to revote.
To be very clear on this matter, because it's of significance, I would recommend that the motion be remade and the vote be re-voted.
Are no objections? If not, then if we can go back to the previous item on the agenda, just to ensure again that we are in the clear. Then on new council business, public hearing on resolutions of intent to issue institutional review bonds, Citation Holdings LLC, Breck Manufacturing, which is in District 4. I will restate the motion to recommended action. I move that we take the staff's recommended action to close the public hearing, adopt the resolution, and authorize the necessary signatures. Now defer to the council member of the 4th District for a second. Motion has been made and then seconded. Clerk will open a roll. We will vote. Again, I apologize for misstating the first motion. Result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, that motion does pass. Thank you, Councilmember or Vice Mayor Johnson, for also bringing to my attention the error.
Okay, again, Bill Perkins with Public Works and Utilities. This item is an agreement with Evergy for power, for constructing and providing power for the Northwest Water Treatment Plant. Early on in the project, we had conversations with Evergy, identified they only have one asset in the area that was available with the capacity to provide power for the facility. Due to the size of that asset, an electrical substation will be necessary. We're planning to provide a single line from that substation to the plant, but we're not giving up any redundancy. The substation itself will be switched to where it has a redundancy of transmission. It can be served from 2 different directions from their 138 kV line. And then we also have backup power on site. We have generators on site to provide a redundancy of the distribution of the electricity. So some background on the project as far as this agreement. In June of 2019, we met with the project steering committee with several different alternatives for where the substation might be, how we might get power to the Northwest facility. Settled on a substation site. In March of 2020, City Council approved the purchase of the property where we're going to build the substation. In October, we had an open public meeting at the Extension Agency building at 21st and Ridge. We had placed door hangers on all of the properties in the 2 neighborhoods adjacent to the site, as well as all the information. Due to COVID, all the information was also put on a website if they didn't want to come to the public meeting. In December, we presented the project to DAB 5, and I will point out an error in the agenda report. The agenda report says DAB 4, but it was DAB 5, is DAB 5. DAB 5 is where the substation actually sits. District 5 is where it actually sits. Then in April, as part of the MAPC process for the conditional use and zoning approvals, it was presented to DAB 5 again and approved. And then in April 8th, MAPC approved the project. This is an overall of what the project consists of. The orange line is the existing 138 kV line. In the upper right is the Northwest plant site. In the lower left is where the substations plan to be on the south side of 13th Street. And then the yellow line, basically along 13th and Windmill, will be an underground facility. We're not putting any poles along that route. This will be an underground facility. A little more detail on the site. So parcel 1 in the diagram is what will be transferred to Evergy for the actual substation site. The remainder of the property that was purchased stays as parcel 2 and will be conveyed to Park Department for some future unknown use. at this time. The basics of the agreement, in the agreement, there is an estimate of $8.28 million identified. The Northwest Water Project funding has approximately $11 million set aside for electrical power to the site. We will pay the actual cost, not just the estimate. Evergy will be constructing all of these facilities, the substation and the required power lines, to a metering point on the plant site. The timeline has been coordinated with our design builder on the Northwest Water facility, and we have included DAB 5 will have an additional review of the wall design that would be around the substation. And then also included is a transfer of that parcel 1 for the substation site. So with that, staff recommends to approve the agreement with Evergy and the transfer of the property and authorize the necessary signatures, and I stand for any questions.
Questions of staff? Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. I know you just said DAB 5 will be able to see the wall design. Will they be able to see the entire design, what that station will look like and how it kind of fits in?
They'll see the entire design, yeah. What was specifically identified when we met with DAB 5 is they wanted to have comments on what the wall would look like, but yeah, they'll see the whole design.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions for staff? See none. Thank you, sir. Is there input from the public? See none. We'll bring discussion back to the bench. Is there further discussion on the item? Councilmember Fry.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Mayor, for that question. Both neighborhoods, Country Acres and Spinnaker Coves, have been very involved in seeing this as it fits into their neighborhood. One of the very important considerations was overhead power lines and poles versus the underground option, which I know you're familiar with that, having gone through that. This is a very important corridor, a lot of traffic, and trying to reduce that visual pollution has been very key for this. It's an important project. I'm thrilled that it's under budget and that it's on time, and just look forward to getting it next steps.
Councilmember Fry, there is no one else on the board for discussion. Since this falls under District 5, if you would like to retain the floor for a motion, then the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. I make a motion that the City Council approve the agreement, approve the transfer of ownership of real property, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion has been seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. The result of 7 yeas, that motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Design concept for improvements to Broadway, 13th Street North to 21st Street North.
Welcome back, sir.
Thank you. Good morning again, Mayor and Council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. The item before you this morning is a design concept for improvements to Broadway from 13th Street North to 21st Street North. I've got quite a bit of information to share, and so I'll try to get through this quickly. Looking at some background, one of the items I did not include on here, but I want to mention first, is back in October of 2020, the City Council approved the 2021 Outsourced Pavement Preservation Plan citywide. And that's an important aspect here because that's allowing us an opportunity to have a clean slate with the new surfacing being done on Broadway from 13th to 21st Street, which allows the opportunity to look at restriping to accommodate multimodal facilities. Beyond that, in May of this year, the Wichita Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Board recommended using a portion of the bike and pedestrian multimodal accommodation funding for improvements to this section of Broadway. On May 11th, the City Council approved funding for that bike and pedestrian multimodal accommodations. And then on June of this year, the Bike Ped Advisory Board approved this preliminary design concept that you will see today. And on July 12th, the District 6 Advisory Board voted 8-0 to approve this same design concept. We invited all adjacent property owners to that District Advisory Board meeting as well as to this meeting today to provide input. We've heard from several property owners and users in the area since that time, and I'd like to reflect on some of the things we've talked to them about today. I might mention real quick on that multimodal accommodations funding was put in place in the CIP to look at situations exactly like this. It was to support pavement rehabilitation projects, modifications that were made to arterial streets in particular, in the OP3 and allowing the opportunity to look at improvements that would be possibly shown in the Wichita Bicycle Master Plan, the Pedestrian Master Plan, improvements that are recommended by the Bike Ped Advisory Board, or other ways that we hear from citizens or working through you as the district council members. And so this is one of our first opportunities to use this funding. We think this is a great place to do it, and excited about the chance to do this on Broadway. We've done this in other areas of the city that I'll talk about in a moment, but this will be our first time to do this in a situation quite like this. So we're focused on Broadway from 13th to 21st Street North only at this time, and I wanted to qualify that because we've had quite a few discussions with others. People that live and work along the Broadway corridor that know in the past we've looked at the area south of 13th Street, including coming into the downtown core area. Our planning director, Scott Wadle, had previously led a pretty detailed study looking at the area south of 13th Street, particularly from Murdoch down to Central and even a little south of there, but potentially doing the same thing of converting to 3 lanes with on-street bike lanes. There was a committee involved, there were adjacent property owners involved that looked at a variety of options, and they did come to a point of recommending potentially the same thing that you see today. But I just want to make sure it was clear that we're only focused on 13th to 21st Street today. This, we think, will provide us a really good opportunity to see how a corridor like Broadway could function. We have no concerns that we're going to be creating any safety issues here, but it'll give us an opportunity in an area that maybe it's a little easier to implement right now before we would consider moving south. Broadway is currently a 4-lane roadway with narrow sidewalks, and again, our goal is to convert that to 3 lanes with on-street bike lanes. This shows a typical section, and actually the dimensions are for this section of Broadway, the top part being a profile section showing the 3-lane roadway. So you've got 1 through lane in each direction and a 2-way center left turn lane. Again, I mentioned that there's sidewalks typically behind the curb in this area, narrow sidewalks. So there's currently no accommodations for bicycles except to share the lane with vehicles. So what this shows is 5-foot bike lanes on each side, 11-foot travel lanes, 12-foot center through lane. I mentioned before that we've got other locations in the city that we've done this with a conversion from 4-lane to 3-lane. We've been working on the Mount Vernon corridor for some time from the river all the way to Woodlawn. We're currently wrapping up the section from Broadway to Southeast Boulevard. Prior to that, we had converted Mount Vernon from all over to Woodlawn from 4-lane to 3 lanes. It seems to be working well. We've had a lot of positive input from the citizens and those users in the area. 17th Street is another one I might mention, from Hillside to Oliver, directly adjacent to Wichita State. That was done at the time when the Innovation Campus really started moving and development was happening there. We've heard a lot of good things, especially from users around Wichita State and students, that that's been really successful in using that. And I just want to mention again, what's going to be happening here. We've had a lot of questions about the impact to businesses, to properties. We are staying within the limits of the existing curb. There will be no change to access. The curbs do not move. This is a pavement rehabilitation and resurfacing project, which allows us to go in and restripe the pavement to the 3 lanes, provide signage, and everything that goes with that. I'll hit on a couple of highlights here. This is information that we provide quite often. There's been a lot of studies done across the country, especially in communities our size and larger, of what the benefits are of converting from 4-lane to 3-lane. The first thing that happens that we see, and others see too, is a reduction in rear-end collisions. And generally that's over 40%. I think most everybody's aware of what happens without a dedicated left turn lane and multiple lanes in each direction, is you get that inside lane typically in each direction starts serving as a left turn lane. And if people aren't paying attention, that creates the opportunity for rear-end collisions. People are trying to change lanes at the last minute. There's some issues with visibility that can be seen on this diagram, and I apologize, this is a little bit small. But by creating one lane in each direction with that two-way center left turn lane, it creates much better visibility. This is the reason why we create dedicated left turn lanes at intersections, so that you no longer have that offset and the turning vehicles are facing each other so you can see around them. Improved pedestrian safety is a big part of this. Right now, when pedestrians are trying to cross Broadway, they have to deal with 2 lanes in each direction and really nothing in the middle to help them out there. So they've either got to be comfortable standing in the middle of the road until the traffic comes from the other direction or cross all 4 lanes at once. What this does for pedestrians is they've only got to deal with 1 lane. They don't have to worry about traffic changing, people trying to make passes, passing another vehicle at the last second while they're trying to cross the road. It does provide the potential for a safe haven with that center turn lane then, and you only have to cross 1 other lane at a time. That's been a big benefit that most communities have seen more than anything. And also, that center left turn lane can provide that same ability for vehicles trying to enter and exit businesses to be able to get out onto Broadway, even if they normally wouldn't have that on a 4-lane roadway. So we've seen that a lot on going to odd number of lanes on a lot of our arterial corridors, and it really provides for more efficient traffic flow. From a capacity perspective, we hear a lot of what happens if you go from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. A 3-lane roadway can still accommodate typically up to 17,000 vehicles per day. Right now, Broadway in this area is around 10,000 vehicles per day, so we would expect this to accommodate future growth for quite some time. And generally, the same studies have shown that there's very little reduction in capacity and ultimately end up seeing some traffic calming from this too. This shows what Broadway would look like, particularly at 17th Street. So Broadway is running left to right, north being to the right side of the screen. This is a little bit hard to see, but it shows the new pavement markings for the 2-way center left turn lane, 1 lane in each direction, and then the bike lanes on the outside. 17th Street, I mentioned, we're wrapping up construction now at that intersection. And so 17th Street from Broadway back to McAdams Park at 135 is being built to the same configuration with 3 lanes with on-street bike lanes. And we'll talk about that more in just a moment. One of the things I want to mention real quick while I'm on this slide, and I mentioned our planning director's past initiative and looking at this corridor. I think most of you are probably familiar with the Broadway corridor. There's a lot of mixed use along there. There are some vacant properties, certainly. There's a lot of big parking lots based on past requirements for parking for the types of businesses that were there. One of the things that study looked at was the hope to really drive economic development on this corridor by making a change like this. We've heard from citizens who want the opportunity to be able to bike on Broadway to get to those destinations, to get to those businesses. We've heard from people who think that might provide the ability to allow less parking from a planning standpoint. If you've got the option to ride your bike safer on this corridor. So that's something we're kind of excited to see what might happen in the future, again, using this corridor as an example. This is a really busy map. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It was something that we wanted to illustrate for the District Advisory Board and the people along the corridor. But starting on the right side, I'll walk you through this real quick. The 2 blue lines that you see are the existing Redbud bike path and the connection up to Gypsum Creek. The red, I mentioned previously, was a conversion we made in 2018 adjacent to Wichita State. We went from 4 lanes to 3 lanes with on-street bike lanes. The next purple section is a project that's scheduled in the CIP for 2025 to do the exact same thing. Then when you get to the blue that's running north and south, that's the existing bike path that connects north through the park into the K96 path and also goes south along 135. The red portion is what I just mentioned that we're wrapping up on 17th Street right now. Having said all of that, we have a pretty big gap in our bike path system where you see that small purple line. The last blue line is the existing Midtown path that stops right now at 15th and Broadway. Once everything's done on 17th, there's really no way to get between the two safely without hopping onto Broadway as it is right now. So this conversion will provide a really big connector between 17th Street and the Midtown Path, which effectively, if you looked on a bigger map, and I tried to show it and it was just too hard to see, it's one of the more glaring gaps we have in our bike path system across the city. So this is going to connect a lot of people to a lot of areas with bicycle facilities. I wanted to mention one more quick thing, and then I'll start to wrap this up. We've had a lot of questions about transit capabilities and how that might be impacted, or how transit operations will work. Along this stretch of Broadway, there are 9 transit stops, 5 outbound, 4 inbound. I spoke just yesterday with Director Mike Tan about this. He said it's really not uncommon for their bus drivers to be able to navigate through a 3-lane section. We do have the space with the additional bike lane. Certainly if a bus stops and a bike is behind them, they may have to stop too. We had the question of what happens with through traffic. Those stops are for a pretty minimal amount of time. And also utilizing that extra space for the bike lane and up next to the curb, it generally does allow a safe way for cars to go around the bus if they so desire. But either way, the stops are for a minimum period of time. And as Mike mentioned, this is an accepted practice in urban environments, so we don't see that as being any issue. So I mentioned before, on May of this year, the city approved a budget for the bike and pedestrian multimodal accommodations for modifications to pavement preservation projects, enhancing the ability to use street right-of-way for multiple modes of transportation. Staff recommends the use of these funds for design and project oversight for this section of Broadway from 13th to 21st. With that, staff recommends City Council approve the design concept. And if you do, the pavement repairs on Broadway are going to happen regardless. Those are expected to start in September. We would wrap up the new surfacing in October, so this would be in place by the end of October. Thank you for bearing with me. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Other questions for staff? Councilmember Cirillo.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just one question. So this $150,000 that was budgeted for the entire multimodal accommodations plan, is that the entire amount that's going to be spent on this project?
No, that is not, and I apologize, I was not more clear on that, and I appreciate you asking. We are working on finalizing the design right now for the new pavement markings. One of our biggest challenges when you convert a section like this and really not connecting to anything on either end is making accommodations at the intersections at 13th and 21st Street. And I think we can do that. We've done that in other parts of the city. Point being, we still need to finish the design before we can develop costs. I would expect with design, project management, within the project budget itself, we already had funding for striping to 4 lanes. This will be additional cost because you've got the bike emblems and signage. If I had to guess, we probably won't use half of that, but we could probably get to a point of $75,000 for this particular project. On the previous item, when the council approved that funding, we also talked about some other locations, including 1st and 2nd Street at 135, to begin some design for changes there. So that money will not all be used on this project.
Thank you.
Further questions for staff? See none. Thank you. Is there input from the public? See none. We'll bring discussion back to the bench. Is there discussion on the item? If there is no discussion, the chair recognizes Councilmember Claycomb as this resides in District 6.
Thank you, and I want to thank staff for their work on this. I know this is not part of the item today, but as Gary mentioned, the much-needed new surfacing project for Broadway is a great opportunity for us to take advantage of this multimodal project. And the benefits of this project, Gary talked about safety and connectivity to existing bike and ped path and lanes is really needed in this particular neighborhood. So this gives us the opportunity to implement and evaluate these results before any other changes are made to Broadway, and I think that's another great opportunity of this project. So with that, I move that we take the staff recommended action and approve the design concept.
Second.
Motion has been seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open a roll. The result of 7 yeas, that motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Traffic signal improvements on Ridge Road at Village Circle.
Welcome
Morning, Mayor
again.
and Council members, Gary Jansen, one more time. The last item I have for you this morning is a proposed petition for traffic signal improvements on Ridge Road at Village Circle. Thank you. Oops. Try the next PowerPoint. All right, thank you. We're ready. So a petition was received to signalize the intersection of Ridge Road and Village Circle, signed by just under 67% of the resident owners, representing just over 80% of the improvement district area, submitted in support of the proposed improvements, making the petition valid per Kansas statute. Either one of those have to be met, exceeding 50% for the petition to be valid. On August 2nd, the District 5 Advisory Board recommended approval of the petition by a vote of 8-0. Just to orient you really quick where we're at, left to right across the middle of the screen is K96 and Ridge Road. Village Charters is to the upper left. Moving south of there is the Ag Credit Building, Quick Trip. Wigand has a new building just southeast of where the traffic signal is, but where you see that traffic signal ahead is the area that's proposed to be signalized. This intersection does currently meet warrants and has for some time for a new traffic signal. And there's considerable development coming to this area, which is going to add to the traffic. That was part of the projections, but again, it already met warrants even without the new development. Since this signal serves a larger area than just the adjacent development, we've looked at a hybrid approach to funding, just as we've done in other parts of the city that we're working on with the signal at 21st and Broadmoor right now as one example. And so we've recommended that the funding for this project be split between the City of Wichita and the Benefit District, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. This shows the improvement district area within the red boundaries. The green are the property owners who have signed in support of the project. The estimated cost is $350,000. The cost will be assessed on a fractional basis. The final cost will be split as 50% to the City of Wichita and then 50% split equally amongst the improvement district on both sides of Ridge Road. And just a reminder that 67% of the resident owners signed in favor of 80% of the improvement district. Just to show you where this is at, again, looking southwest to the Quick Trip, there's a lot of things happening here back to the left, especially in that area with new development that's adding to the traffic generation for the area. I mentioned again that the estimated cost is $350,000. Whatever the final cost will be, that would be split 50% to the city and the rest being to the assessment district. The method assessment is on a fractional basis and, as always, does not include financing costs that will be incurred during design, construction, or bonding phase of the project. The funding source for the city's share is general obligation bonds, which will be funded from the 2021 Traffic Signalization Fund approved by the City Council on March 2nd of this year. So I will mention, especially based on a recent bid we had for installation of a traffic signal at Zoo and Hoover Road, and that we're seeing on quite a few projects across the city, there continues to be fluctuation in costs in the market, depending on the type of work that's being done. Materials availability issues are continuing to drive a lot of those costs. Contractors are generally busy, so their schedules are driving some of that too. We looked at this estimate again recently, and I'll tell you it's going to be close. By the time we design this project and get traffic signals ordered and installed by next spring, we're hoping to see maybe a little bit more stability in the market. But hopefully we don't have to come back and have this discussion again. I think our estimate's conservative, But I just wanted to mention that costs are a little all over the board right now, and based on our most recent one, we'll just have to see how this goes. So with that, staff recommends City Council approve the project, adopt the resolution, authorize necessary signatures, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Are there questions of staff? Seems not. Is there input from the public? See none. Discussion back to the bench. The discussion on the item. If there is no discussion, then the chair will recognize Councilmember Fry as this item resides in District 5.
Thank you, sir. I would just like to point out that this intersection has been challenged for some time. Staff has helped it by redesigning some of the striping a couple of years ago and added left turn lanes because the width of the road allowed it, and that really helped. But we know the stoplight is absolutely necessary because of the additional growth we're seeing. So with that, I move that we approve the project, adopt the resolution, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk, open a roll. Members cast a vote. Having received 7 yeas, that motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Ordinances creating chapters 2.76 and 2.77 of the Code of the City of Wichita pertaining to open public records.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, council members, I'm Beth Harlinsky, Assistant City Attorney from the Law Department. And before you today are 2 proposed ordinances that create new chapters of the city code dealing with open records and the fees for producing such records. And as you know, the Kansas Open Records Act, known as the KORA, governs access to records of public agencies. And the act provides both substantive and procedural guidance regarding access to such records. The city of Wichita processes well over 3,000 requests annually, and that amount is steadily increasing from year to year. And I checked yesterday, and to date, this year we have received 2,107 requests. And the KORA statute was originally passed by the Kansas legislature in 1984, and since that time, the city of Wichita has had an administrative regulation on file regarding policy for addressing KORA requests. And because of the ever-increasing number of requests, when this regulation most recently came up for review, the Law Department recommended that we codify the policy into an ordinance, as has been done in many Kansas cities that we looked at. And in the process of drafting these proposed ordinances, guidance was obtained from various sources. The KORA statute itself formed the basis for the proposed provisions and is referenced throughout the ordinances. And additionally, we looked at publications of the Kansas Attorney General's office that provided ordinance templates, and training courses offered by the Kansas AG's office and attended by city staff were also a useful resource. Finally, a review of similar ordinances from other cities around Kansas provided helpful examples, specifically those from Topeka, Olathe, Prairie Village, Lenexa, and the Unified Government of Wyandotte County. And the proposed ordinances are intended to standardize the KORA process and the fees that are charged for access to city records. The policy and purpose is set forth, stating that all records which are made or maintained or kept or are in the possession of the city shall be open for public inspection, subject to the provisions and limitations and restrictions imposed by the KORA. The statutory intent that is set forth in the KORA statute is also set forth in the proposed ordinance, that the provisions of the KORA should be construed liberally and in favor of the presumption that we produce records rather than the exception. To provide you with a general overview of the ordinances, first, the proposed Chapter 2.76 deals with the actual process of handling requests for records. This ordinance officially appoints the city clerk as the city's local Freedom of Information officer and sets forth the responsibilities of that position. The proposed ordinance names each department director as the official custodian of records of their individual departments that are not maintained by the city clerk, and specifies the duties of those departmental director custodians. And additionally, the ordinance allows the department directors to appoint designees to serve in that capacity. In addressing the core process, the ordinance recognizes that the city may receive requests for records, for inspection of records, as well as for copies of records, and so procedures for both inspecting and copying records are stated. The ordinance encourages providing electronic copies whenever possible, to the extent that's allowed by law. And in fact, a lot of the requests that we receive specifically ask that the records be provided electronically. And as the city has moved to electronic storage of records, this is certainly something we're able to do. Sending records by email provides more rapid access to the requesting public without them having to appear at City Hall or wait for records to be sent by U.S. mail. And as you might imagine, this was very popular and very helpful to city staff during the COVID shutdown. We were able to continue pretty much as normal. But also with the city moving toward posting more information on its website, the ordinance provides that if the records are available online, the records custodians are to provide the requester with information on how those records can be accessed. But no matter how the records are provided, the city must respond within 3 business days after receiving the request, as is required by state law and is set forth in our proposed ordinance. The core statute states that copies of audio, video, or photographic records generally need not be provided. Unfortunately, the statute's a little bit behind technology and does not specifically address access to such records that are stored digitally, as most of the city's more recent records are. But with an interpretation provided by our local district court, the proposed ordinance does set forth some guidance for these types of records and recognizes that when audio, video, or photographic records are stored digitally as computer data, those copies can be provided as with any other digital record. Additionally, the language of the proposed ordinance is consistent with state law regarding access to body-worn camera video, and it does provide a procedure when copies of audio or video records cannot be provided, but listening access is allowed. It provides a procedure for that, for staff to set that up. And sometimes requests for reports must be delayed when additional time beyond the 3-day response period is needed by staff to either locate the records or maybe make a determination as to whether they are open or restricted. And like the core statute, the proposed ordinance allows for a delay response. The delay notice must be in writing. It must provide a date by which the records, by which it's anticipated the records will be provided, and it must be within that 3-day response window. The proposed ordinance also states procedure for denial of access to records if a determination is made that they are restricted by law or for some of the reasons set forth in the CORA. Any denial of records must be provided in writing. It must state the reason for the denial along with the statutory basis for that denial. And the ordinance also requires that access to records cannot be denied without review by the law department. The proposed ordinance creating Chapter 2.77 addresses the fees that can be charged for providing inspection access to or copies of city public records. The ordinance creates a uniform fee schedule, as mentioned before, that is required by statute and will be available for consultation by both the public and city staff. The CORA statute provides that any fees that are charged for access to public records must be reasonable, and they must represent the actual cost to the city for providing records. And the proposed ordinance states what can be included in those fees and mirrors what is allowed by the Kansas Attorney General. Fees for staff time can include inspection and research, search of data storage devices, extracting data from computerized databases, writing computer programs to extract data, copying cost, and time that is necessary to review and organize documents once they're produced or extracted, and costs for postage and shipping are just the actual cost of what that is to the city. And the proposed ordinance sets out fees for staff time in 15-minute increments. No fee ordinance for any other city that was reviewed does this, but the decision was made to state the fees in this ordinance in those 15-minute increments due to the fact that many requests take well under an hour, under 30 minutes, and that allows, having that schedule in 15-minute increments allows a more precise and a smaller time to be billed to the person making the request. Also, the fees that are set forth are the result of figuring the actual cost by the city as closely as possible. Figuring an exact amount is difficult, but the amounts that you're being asked to approve in the proposed Chapter 277 fall on the side of lower rather than higher amounts. I should also mention it's very difficult to use fee schedules from other cities as a guide because by statute, the fees must reflect the actual cost to the city, to Wichita. And because pay scales vary among cities and agencies, and cities may use different classifications of employees to respond to core requests, calculating the actual cost will lead to different amounts for different cities. And on balance, the fees that are proposed before you are less than those charged by other Kansas cities and agencies that were consulted when this was drafted. Also, the proposed costs do not increase the existing fee schedule that is currently on file with the city clerk, with the exception of 3 individual fees. Finally, the proposed fee ordinance provides that there will be no charge for the first 30 minutes of staff time required to facilitate inspection of records. The proposed ordinance also mirrors the requirements of the CORA that public agencies must provide a requesting party with an advance estimate of the cost to obtain any records that are being sought. There are no minimum fees required, rather it's based on the actual amount of staff time and cost involved. And as previously mentioned, there's no charge for the first 30 minutes of staff time for the inspection of records. Fees must be prepaid before records are provided to the requesting party as allowed by the CORA statute. And additionally, there is a provision that no fees assessed by the ordinance may be waived, but authority is provided that allows a department record custodian to waive any copying fee that's under $5 if they want to do so. Expected outcomes, should you approve the 2 proposed ordinances, are that by codifying the city's open records policy, it will be more readily accessible to persons who are seeking to request city public records. I do want to emphasize, however, that the proposed ordinance should cause no noticeable change in the current process as far as any member of the public who is making requests for records. Requests will be made just the same as they're being made now under these ordinances. The point of codifying the city's records policy was not to change the process, but to make it more transparent. And once records are made, there will be a clear and consistent guidance for city staff regarding CORA requests and the directed response to them. A unified fee schedule will be in place that will be applicable to all city records and will be readily available. And finally, although it's not a part of the ordinance, mandatory training for all CORA custodians is planned with the implementation of these ordinances, along with any continued training as necessary in the future. So you're being asked to place the ordinances on first reading and authorize the necessary signatures, and I would stand for any questions.
Questions for staff? Just for clarification, the current process for requesting having a core request will still be in place, and this will be an optional process as well that is also an option that is intended to make core more easily accessible. Is that a correct statement?
I think so, yes. Again, nothing's going to change. The way our citizens can make requests right now will continue. This just sets it forth in an ordinance.
There are further questions? Thank you. Input from the public.
Good morning. I am really thankful the state has the Kansas Open Records Request Act, because when I first realized there were things going on that weren't defined in the budget or explained in the CAFR, I started filing CORAs, and I love it because it requires you to open up your books and tell us how money is actually being spent. The first CORA I filed was in September 2019 to find out what deferred maintenance was on Century 2. It took 2 CORA requests to get this information. So I wonder if you're going to note how many requests a citizen had to file to get the requested information. I also wonder if you're going to put addresses or names on the CORA requests. I'm assuming no. I'm also wanting to know that how you're going to handle CORA requests. And when I talk about these examples, it's because I've experienced them. So I'm speaking from experience. So if you have any questions about what I've experienced, I'll stand for questions later. But I've had CORA requests that came back closed, no records found, and then subsequently the records were found, and I was called and told, oops, they were found in the Public Works Department and should have been entered in the fire department's compliance software from 2018 forward. So how are you going to handle those oops when no record was supposedly found, but actually the records were found later? How will errors be handled that are found in the CORA process? I've talked about this before. I found an $18 million error in the CAFR, and I have found errors in the CAFR stormwater utilities bonds that were actually for Jim Corrick's Fairfield Inn. When these errors are found by citizens in CORA requests, I would like to see these errors notated in the CORA request database so people trying to figure out how money was spent will realize there have been mistakes in the CAFRs. I have suggestions for you on how to save filings of CORAs. You need an advanced search function on the city's website, and I think you should pay for that immediately, and I think it's more important than even this 3-lane change on North Broadway. Advanced record search would allow a person to, instead of filing CORA requests, let's say I'm trying to find, like I was told with this superfluous request about what debt was for out of the transient guest tax, I could actually do a search on Jim Corrick or Series 811 bonds and find the information, the official statement for those bonds, where it mentions Jim Corrick's hotel in Waterwalk. And I wouldn't have to file a CORA request trying to find this information, and I would free up staff time if you had an advanced search function on the city's website. Please get one in place. You've got an antiquated search function, and that's ridiculous for a city of this size that you can't do an advanced search request on city council documents. Also, transcribe past city council hearings such as this one. For example, in 2015, I was trying to find out how some of you voted when the campaign donation law was changed and allowed contributions from LLCs and companies. I wanted to see exactly how some of you current city council members voted on the first read of that change and on the second read of that change. And the transcript for that city council meeting is inaudible and has not been transcribed. And the actual second vote was lumped together with 3 ordinances in one vote. Transcribe 2015 forward. There's software that will transcribe the spoken word. Get a transcription for every city council meeting from, let's say, 2010 or 2015 forward, so it's not that hard for citizens to determine how you voted. These are all easy requests I'm making today. Sometimes the city does not respond in 3 days. Many times when I file a CORA, in 3 days I get a request for payment. An invoice must be paid. It may take a day or two to make that payment. And then I will get a response back from the city telling me that they need a week or additional time to fulfill the request. 3 weeks later, after I've paid the fee and waited, it will come back, no record found. There has to be some way to determine before you fee me if that actually exists, the record or document I'm requesting. Another thing that I have found that also seems to be ridiculous or unfair with how the city handles CORA requests is I've had dates redacted. Dates that show maintenance problems with Century 2 have had the dates of that maintenance request redacted. Are you kidding me? If that maintenance problem has been out there for 12 years, there's no reason why you don't put that date on that requested document. I cannot believe you would redact a date for a maintenance problem.
Your 5 minutes is up.
So there are a lot of problems with CORAs, and there are a lot of ways you could streamline this process. And it would be money well spent to get an advanced search feature for the website and to do a better job of transcribing city council meeting transcriptions and also votes on first and second ordinances, as the example I used with the campaign refinance law that was changed and now has caused elections to become so expensive. I stand for questions.
So you're in favor of us streamlining this? So this, you would be in, with your experience, this is a good step forward?
I would
And-
assume it's a good step forward, but I think what you need to do, because as I heard from your attorney, Beth Harlinski, there's an increase in CORAs, and I think that's because citizens are trying to be transparent and hold you accountable. So to cut back on this increase in CORAs, one way you could do it, at least from me, I'm speaking from experience again for myself, is put an advanced search feature in there so I can search and find the official statement on those Series 811 bonds for Jim Corrick. Then I don't have to file a CORA. So I'm trying to make a suggestion, but it appears that perhaps this will streamline the process, yes.
Yeah, we really look forward to getting the input from folks like you who utilize CORAs on how we can make it better. So thank you for your comments and for being here. We have a council member, I don't know if he has a question or not, but a council member for you or not, but council member Bluebog, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to ask Bob, I seen you were taking quite a few notes and stuff. Is this something we could look at to see what other cities are doing? And is there something, I'm sure there is software out there, something we could make it a little easier to get some of this information?
Right. Actually, the notes I was taking had to do with restructuring of our website, kind of the recreation of it, which also, I think anyone that's used the website, would agree with Celeste regarding the search function. So that's one of the things we want to make sure we update.
And I'll just throw out there just some talk about possible software upgrades. There might be some opportunities in the future with some of the investments we are looking at as opportunities to transcribe some of those old past meetings. I think the communication was chatting about possibly some of those capabilities in the future if we go down that route. So hopefully we can bring this up to, I think, the expectations of the customer service expectations that the public wants. But with that, there's no more discussion from the bench. We can move forward on this, and I will make the...
Hold on. Is he too late?
Mr. Todd. Thank you, Councilmember Fry, for pointing out we did have more public input.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members
Welcome,
of the
sir.
City Council. John Todd. I'm here speaking as a citizen. One quick comment. In the interest of transparency, I would ask that you, as a citizen, I'd ask that you consider putting the city's checkbook online. County Commission about 10 years ago did. I think it's been very effective as far as letting citizens know what's going on. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any more public input? More discussion from the bench? All right, seeing none. So with that, I will make the motion to take staff's recommended action to place the ordinance on first read and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Second has been made by Vice Mayor Johnson. Clerk, open roll. Having received 7 yeas, that motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
CON 2021-27, city conditional use for group residence limited for home plus assisted living home on property zone, single-family residential, generally located on the east side of North Edgemore Drive, 1 block south of East 13th Street North, 5502 East Polo Drive.
Welcome, sir.
Good morning. Scott Wadle from the Planning Department. This case is a request for a conditional use to allow a group residence limited, which in this case will allow up to 10 individuals to live in the home. This case is being presented today because protests have been received for the application and because the DAB and the Planning Commission recommendations are different. In terms of the property, the subject site is located southeast of 13th Street in Edgemore. The address is 5502 East Polo Drive. It is a single-family house currently being used as a home plus group home, which is a residence or a facility for individuals who need personal care or supervised nursing care to help with limitations and activities of daily living. Currently, the property has 8 residents, and the owner would like to increase the number of residents to 10 individuals. The Unified Zoning Code requires that properties with a conditional use for group residences limited have 1 parking space per bedroom. I bring this up because in this case, that would require currently 8 off-street parking spaces, possibly 10. The property owner has applied for and received a variance to reduce the total number of parking spaces to 2, subject to this conditional use being approved. In terms of the context for the property, the home is located in a single-family neighborhood. The surrounding properties in all directions are zoned SF5, single-family, and developed with single-family homes. The property abutting the subject site to the east was approved for a conditional use with a group residence limited, along with a variance for parking, similar to what the applicant is requesting here. In terms of history, on July 8th, the public hearing for this application was held at the Planning Commission meeting. The Planning Commission voted 6-4 to recommend approval, subject to staff recommendations, which includes 5 conditions that are listed in the staff report. Several members of the public spoke in opposition to this application at the hearing. On July 8th, the District Advisory Board 1 reviewed the application and recommended denial 6-0. Several members of the public spoke in opposition. Valid protests were submitted for this case and totaled 37.5% of the protest area. This exceeds the 20% threshold and will require a supermajority vote for approval or 6 of 7 votes. The recommendation, it is recommended that the City Council approve the application subject to staff recommendations. Because of the protests, this requires, again, a supermajority vote, 6 of 7 votes. Alternatives include the following. You can override the Planning Commission recommendation, provide alternate findings, and deny the conditional use. This would require a 2/3 majority or 5 of 7 votes in order to override the MAPC. You can also approve with modifications to the Planning Commission recommendation. And I apologize, this was a correction from what's in the staff report. That would require a supermajority or 6 of 7 votes because of the protest, not just 2/3 to override, but a supermajority, 6 of 7 votes. And you may return it to the Planning Commission for additional consideration. That would require a simple majority of 4 of 7 votes. And with that, I'll take you through some of the photos and graphics that we have here. So here's an aerial depicting the site outlined in red. This is the surrounding zoning. You can see it's SF5, which is in white. This is the map from the future growth map from the comprehensive plan showing residential as the recommended land use. This is the site plan, which was submitted by the applicant. More detailed interior drawings. This is the protest map. Again, the protest was over the 20% threshold. You can see the official protest in red in the protest area. This is a photo of the site. You can see that the garage has been converted into bedrooms. These are some of the homes in the area around the site. And again, back to the aerial. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions of staff. Councilmember Cirillo.
Thank you, Mayor. Scott, could you go back to page 79, please?
Sure.
I just wanted to look at that floor plan for a little bit.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councilmember Frye.
Thank you. Scott, I want to make sure I understand. They are asking for a variance to reduce the parking requirement from 6 spaces to 2 spaces?
And in this case, excellent question. In this case, that has been granted by the BZA, but it is conditional on whether or not this conditional use gets approved today by the council.
Okay, so then where do they park? Is it just street parking then?
In that case, they would have the 2 parking spaces off-street, and then yes, if they have any additional parking needs, those would be met on-street.
Further questions for staff? See none. Thank you. Input from the public?
There's no input from the public?
Oh. The county is the only one who does the input from the public on these items, so I apologize. We already had a public hearing, so legal just chimed in and told me that we be out of order to do input from the public this time. So with that, we will have discussion from the bench. Is there any discussion from the bench? If there is none, then I will recognize Vice Mayor Johnson of District 1 as this resides in District 1.
Thanks, Mayor. This application seeks approval of a group residence limited facility, which by definition could allow up to 12 residents plus staff. This neighborhood already has a number of group-type facilities. An increasing number of residents, in this case, would further increase the density of community-operated institutions, which is a significant change to the existing single-family neighborhood. The property is currently being used as a group home with 8 residents, and this application would then try to increase that to 10. The increase in number of residents will detrimentally affect nearby property by changing the character of the neighborhood from residential to increasingly higher commercial operated institutions. This expansion and intensification of the institutional uses in the center of the single-family residential neighborhood increases encroachment and pressure for conversion of other single-family residences to similar uses, which we already see in the neighborhood. This proposed conditional use is not in the conformance with the Wichita-Sedgwick County Comprehensive Plan, the Commercial Investments Plan, nor the locational guidelines, which indicates that higher intensity development should be discouraged. The proposed changes would increase the number of residents requiring personal care or nursing, could be detrimental to the access and deployment of safety services, which we've also seen in this neighborhood. There is relatively little hardship on the applicant by denying the 2 additional residents sought in this application. So for those above reasons that I mentioned, an acknowledgement of the objection of a significant amount of neighbors, I move to deny this application.
Motion has been made to deny the application. I will second that motion. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, clerk will open the roll. Members cast their vote. Please.
1 second.
Okay. Technically, Vice Mayor Johnson made the motion to deny.
Right.
Okay.
I'll change that.
As long as it's noted. The result of 7 yeas, that motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
CON 2021-29, city conditional use for group residence limited for home plus assisted living home on property zone 2-family residential, generally located 1,970 feet west of North Mays Road on the north side of West 37th Street North.
Welcome back.
Scott Wadle again from the Planning Department. This case is a conditional use to request permission to allow for a group residence limited, which in this case, again, would allow up to 10 individuals to live in the home. It's being presented today because we've received a protest on this application. In terms of the property, the site is a single-family house located northwest of the intersection of Mays and 37th Street. The address is 10932 West 37th Street North. The owner proposes to operate it as a home plus group home which again is a residence or a facility for individuals who need personal care or supervised nursing care to help with limitations in activities of daily living. State regulations allow up to 8 unrelated individuals to reside in a single-family home. The owner would like to increase the number of residents to 10 individuals, which requires the conditional use for the group home residence limited. In terms of context, properties to the north, east, and west are in the city of Wichita and zoned SF5 single-family and developed with single-family houses. The property to the south, across 37th Street, is located in the city of Mays and developed with a single-family residence on 5.5 acres. In terms of history, on July 8th, the public hearing for this application was held at the Planning Commission meeting. The Planning Commission voted 6-4 to recommend approval, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, including the following: a maximum of 10 residents and 2 staff members. The owner or manager shall comply with all regulations and licensing required by the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services, and no freestanding signs shall be allowed. Members of the public spoke in opposition to the application at the public hearing. On July 7th, the District Advisory Board 5 reviewed the application and recommended approval 7-1. Members of the public spoke in opposition. Valid protests were received for this case and totaled 80% of the protest area. This exceeds the 20% threshold and will require a supermajority vote for approval or 6 of 7 votes. The recommendation: it is recommended that the City Council approve the application subject to staff recommendations. Because of the protests, this requires a supermajority, again, 6 of 7 votes. Alternatives include the following: you can override the Planning Commission recommendation, provide alternative findings, and deny the conditional use. This would require a 2/3 majority or 5 of 7 votes. You can approve with modifications to the Planning Commission recommendation. This, because of the protest, would require a supermajority, and that is 6 of 7 votes, which I believe is a correction from what's in the staff report, which had listed previously 5. So 6 of 7 votes to approve a modification. And finally, you can return to the Planning Commission for additional consideration, which would require a simple majority of 4 of 7 votes. And with that, I'll take you through some of the photos and graphics for this case. So here's the aerial with the site outlined in red. You can see that it is surrounded by residential development to the north, east, and west. Here's the zoning map showing that the property is zoned TF3, which is 2-family residential zoning. SF5 is found to the north. This is the map from the comprehensive plan. Again, because this area is divided between the county, city of Mays, city of Wichita, you can see there's a variety of different colors. The portion in yellow is what's in the city of Wichita and is recommended for residential. Here's a site plan that was submitted by the applicant. It proposes an addition being made to the existing single-family home. This is the protest map. Again, the protest accounted for 80% of the protest area in exceeding the 20% threshold. Here's a photo of the single-family house on the site and the garage in the background. These are the homes to the east. Again, back to the subject site. Homes to the northeast, along 37th Street, looking south along the property line, south along 37th, the home directly across the street, and back to the aerial. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions of staff? No questions, then we will have discussion at the bench. Is there discussion on the item? No discussion, then Chair will recognize Councilmember Fry of District 5.
Thank you, sir. So, as we heard with the last case, these are challenging issues, and we have to take into account ADA and constitutional issues when considering them, and definitely have to recognize that an 80% valid protest is significant in that notification area. But when you take into consideration the golden factors identified under our Kansas law, which constitutes the basis for approval or denial, I cannot find enough compelling factors to support a denial, especially since the parking is contained within the lot. Neighborhood opposition is certainly a factor to consider, but it cannot be the sole consideration to justify denial. I have spoken to both parties, the applicant as well as homeowners adjacent to the property. Both parties agree that a conditional use for group residence limited to a licensed Home Plus facility with no more than 10 residents on site is common ground and a compromise. The site is obviously within a neighborhood, and keeping in that look and feel of a residence is important to everyone. So therefore, I move to approve the application, including the recommendations by staff, with the additional condition that the group residence be limited to a Home Plus licensed facility as defined by the Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services with no more than 10 residents residing in the facility.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open a roll. Members will cast the vote. Please vote of 7 yeas. That motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
CON 2021-30, city conditional use to allow an accessory apartment on property zone 2-family residential, generally located 1,970 feet west of North Mays Road on the north side of West 37th Street North.
Welcome back.
Hello again, Scott Wadle from the Planning Department. This case involves the same property as the previous case, so I won't spend too much time on that. What they are asking for in this case is an accessory apartment, approval for an accessory apartment at the subject site, and that is because the garage does have an accessory apartment that was constructed as part of it, and it is currently out of illegal per the Unified Zoning Code, so they'd like to get into compliance. This is being presented today because protests have been received for the application. I won't go into describing the location as that was done with the previous case. Again, the address is 10932 West 37th Street. It's a single-family house, TF3 zoning. In terms of the context, again, surrounded by single family to the north, east, and west, there is a single-family home across the street on 5.5 acres. In terms of history, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report. There were members of the public who spoke in opposition. This item was presented at the same time as the previous one, and so their concerns were incompatible land use, traffic, and drainage issues. On July 7th, the District Advisory Board 5 reviewed the application, recommended approval unanimously. Valid protests have been received, accounting for 80% of the protest area, and therefore this case will require a supermajority vote, 6 of 7, to approve. In terms of the recommendation, it is recommended the City Council approve the application subject to staff recommendations. Because of the protest, again, requires 6 of 7 votes. Alternatives are to override the Planning Commission and provide alternative findings. That requires a supermajority or 5 of 7 votes. You can approve with modifications, which would again require a supermajority because of the protest, 6 of 7 votes, or you can return it to the Planning Commission for additional consideration, which would require a simple majority or 4 of 7 votes. And with that, I'll take you through some of the slides. Seeing the aerial, here's the zoning map. Here's the map again from the comprehensive plan showing residential is recommended. Here's a site plan. It shows in the top upper left-hand corner of the property the accessory apartment with a garage. Here's the protest map and photos of the site and some of the surrounding homes. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for staff? Seeing none. Chair recognizes Councilmember Frye, District 5.
Thank you. This one's pretty cut and dry. Getting this accessory unit into the Unified Zoning Code is paramount. So with that, I recommend that we take the staff's, adopt the findings of the MAPC and approve the requested conditional use for the accessory apartment, authorize the necessary signatures, and instruct the city clerk to publish the resolution.
Vice Mayor. Motion has been seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. Result is 7 yeas. That motion does pass. Thank you, Scott. Madam Clerk.
Resolution supporting the extension of Amtrak services.
Welcome.
Good morning, council members, Mayor Jennifer Magana, City Attorney. The item before you is a resolution supporting extension of Amtrak's Heartland Flyer line from Oklahoma City through Wichita to Newton. Currently, Amtrak is going through its Vision 2035 planning process, which identifies expansion opportunities along rail corridor routes. Wichita has not had passenger rail service since 1979, and this expansion is estimated to add 100 to 200,000 passengers annually. The city's excited that the Department of Transportation continues to express interest in supporting the Heartland Flyer extension, and this resolution would demonstrate the city's resolve in making sure that the federal infrastructure dollars will come the city's way when available. We're also aware that there's a need to continue to work with other numerous state and local officials and funding partners all along the route to assure the line's completion and success. I would add that this is a resolution, a formal expression of the city's position, and it is recommended that you approve the resolution and authorize all necessary signatures.
Questions for staff? See none. Input from the public? See none. With that, I will, Councilmember Claycomb.
Thank you, Jennifer. We've been working on the return of passenger rail to Wichita for quite some time, working with our partners in Kansas and Oklahoma, as well as Amtrak and state and federal delegations. And we are probably the closest we've been to seeing return of Amtrak since it left Wichita in 1979. There are lots of benefits to passenger rail. I think one of the most important is the attraction and retention of young people. For example, with in-state tuition at WSU for students along this corridor, this is a great amenity for them. And for older generations, it's a mode of transportation when they don't want to or cannot drive or fly. So I hope my colleagues will join me today in support of this resolution. This will help send another strong message to our federal congressional delegation about Wichita's desire for the return of passenger rail.
All right. With that, Councilmember Fry is next on the list.
Yes, thank you. So I had the opportunity to be in Oklahoma this weekend, and I picked up a copy of Ponca City Magazine, and they had an extensive article about the return of passenger rail and making the connection to Kansas. And so that was timely, and I just wanted to thank Councilmember Claycomb for her continued diligence on this. I know you've been passionate about restoring service, and you've been working on it since your time on council, so I just wanted to recognize that.
Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. I want to echo Councilmember Fry. Thank you, Councilmember Claycomb, for all your work on this and all those long meetings that we have when we go to D.C. and even away from D.C., so thank you.
Further discussion. I will add that President Biden's infrastructure bill just passed the Senate, which means that we are closer than we've ever been to having passenger rail reinitiated here in Wichita. This is a $64.8 million annual economic impact. This is to pass, and I think that it's so important that because the bipartisan bill did actually cut $20 million, I believe, out of the proposal for passenger rail, or $20 billion, that we get on the record as a city to tell our congregation or our delegation in Washington that we would be appreciative to be in the further plans to restore rail service here to Wichita, which would connect us not only down the corridor in which Wichita State has targeted to to attract and retain young talent, but also to Texas, which I believe is a top 15 economy in ourselves, along with allowing us to be connected to the rest of the rest of the train network. So with that, I'll make the motion that we accept the resolution, approve the resolution, authorize the necessary signatures. Councilmember Claycomb?
Second.
And it was seconded by Councilmember Claycomb. So with that, let's go ahead and open up roll, and with a result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, that motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember appointments and comments.
There are appointments that we could get out of the way first. See none. With that, is there anyone who wish to make a comment? See none. With that, we have 2 blue sheets today. So I'll make a motion that we move it, that the City Council go into recess into executive session for 15 minutes to receive information on an offer of settlement pursuant to KSA 754319B2 for legal consultation with the city attorney, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship about pending litigation, legal advice, claim settlement. The executive session is required to protect attorney-client privilege and the public interest. That will be for 15 minutes. We would ask that that starts at 11:15, so go from 11:15 to 11:30. And I believe I can make, I know I do this, always ask legal this, but I can make the motion for the second one to directly follow. Is this correct? From 11:30 on, then I move that we, the City Council recess into executive session for 30 additional minutes for discussion of an employee performance appraisal pursuant to KSA 754319B2 to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel. The executive session is required to protect the privacy interests of an identifiable individual, and that would begin at 11:31 and go until 12:01. We will meet back here in the City Council chambers to make a motion to end the meeting at that time, or to extend if needed. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Clerk will open a roll. The result is 7 yeas. That motion does pass. We will be in executive session in 5 minutes. Thank you.